God breathed into man. And when he breathed into man, the Bible said man became a living soul. So I am breathing into him now. When I breathe into this mic, he will open his eyes, because that means he became living. He received life. So there is the spirit and there is the container that God molded and formed. In releasing the breath, that was creation. In forming the body, that was process. So take the mic. Open your eyes. What was the first thing you saw?
I saw you.
It's not me. What's my name in this drama?
I saw God.
What did you see first?
I saw God.
God was the first contact of man, not the garden. Stand up. If you can understand this, you will understand the beauty of eternity. What God intended was to give you a garden, because your first contact was with him. This dynamic, or these dynamics that I showed you now, has been what powers my life. You would notice, or you would realize, that in the book of Genesis, it was God that was coming after man. I know we have different submissions, but one of my submissions along that line is how much God valued fellowship with man, that he had to keep coming after man. So the second thing I use as a yardstick for my relationship with God is, how many times has he come for me? Because from the beginning, or in the beginning, he came after man. Even when man had fallen, he came after him. Adam, Adam, where art thou? We heard your voice walking in the garden, and we hid ourselves, for we are naked. Who told you that you are naked? I didn't give you that kind of knowledge. The first contact that you must make as a human being is God. Now, how many of us are familiar with the scripture that says God has set eternity in the heart of men? That word eternity in the heart of men, what does it mean? That word that God has set eternity in men is actually purpose. That all of us have purpose before the Lord. But you see, it's in man. In other words, there is a part of man that can never be fulfilled. There is part of man that is supernatural in nature. There is part of man that sex cannot satisfy. There is part of man that drugs cannot satisfy. What drugs will do for you is to give you a temporal arrangement. When the drugs wanes off, the pain comes back. When there is the ecstasy of sex happens in 3, 4, 5 minutes, the drowning emotion comes back. The negative pull and feel comes back. There is a part of you that addiction to alcohol, addiction to sex, addiction to abuse, addiction to violence, in fact, addiction to success, addiction to achievements, addiction to being among the creme de la creme, addiction to working at something for 10 years and you go at it in pain, in drought, in dryness. there is a vacuum that all of this cannot fill. That vacuum, according to scripture, is called eternity, set in the heart of man. There is something that God dropped into man that nothing can fill it. What is that thing? His breath. From the beginning, what powered your life, what powered your existence has been his breath. The ability to breathe in, what you call oxygen, is God's breath. What doctors call oxygen. Help me tell your neighbor what doctors call oxygen. The Bible calls God's breath. So, God released a portion of him. And when he released a portion of him into you, he now released, with it came dissatisfaction. That the only time you can find satisfaction is when you locate the eternity that is in your heart. Is somebody with me? It's when you locate what? The eternity that God has put. So you can bring back my stuff. The eternity that God has set in your heart, that is the only time you will begin to find satisfaction. That is the only time you will begin to find fulfillment. That's the actual word. You will find fulfillment the moment you begin to give attention to that eternal reality that God had implanted in your inside.